Edward Maxwell sighed impatiently as his deaf mother gestured desperately. The timid nun approached with trembling hands. What she signed made his tears freeze on his face forever. Sister Beatrice Sullivan nervously adjusted the white veil covering her brown hair, her hands trembling slightly as she organized teaching materials in the classroom of the St. Francis Outreach Center. At 32, she had dedicated the last 8 years of her life to working with deaf and mute individuals, transforming that simple space into a true sanctuary of communication and hope. The light blue walls were decorated with colorful posters showing the ASL alphabet, and the tables arranged in a circle created a welcoming environment where dozens of people found a new way to express themselves to the world. On that Tuesday morning, a different buzz filled the center. The director, Sister Margaret, had announced they would receive a special visit from one of the city's most prominent businessmen, Edward Maxwell, owner of a luxury hotel chain spanning across the nation. The visit was part of the company's social responsibility program, and everyone was eager to showcase the work developed at the institution. Sister Beatrice felt her stomach churn with nervousness, as her extreme shyness always paralyzed her in the presence of important or unfamiliar people, causing her words to stumble and her voice to fail at the most crucial moments. The sound of powerful engines echoed through the center's courtyard, announcing the visitors' arrival. Sister Beatrice discreetly peeked through the window and saw 3 black luxury cars pulling up to the main entrance. From the first vehicle stepped a tall, elegant man, wearing an impeccable tailored suit and dark sunglasses, his movements demonstrating the haste and impatience characteristic of someone accustomed to controlling every minute of his schedule. Edward Maxwell walked with long, decisive strides, constantly checking the gold watch adorning his wrist, as if every second lost there represented thousands of dollars in losses. From the second car, a uniformed chauffeur helped an elegant 68-year-old woman descend, her gray hair perfectly styled in a sophisticated bun. Eleanor Maxwell moved with the dignity of someone who once commanded ballrooms and social events, but her eyes revealed a deep sadness that even subtle makeup couldn't disguise. She clutched a small designer leather handbag with both hands, her trembling fingers betraying an anxiety that contrasted with her refined demeanor. Edward approached his mother with mechanical, impatient movements, offering his arm without looking directly at her, like someone fulfilling an unpleasant social obligation. His lips moved rapidly, uttering words that Eleanor obviously couldn't hear, which visibly irritated him. He gestured exaggeratedly and repetitively, as if the volume of his movements could break the barrier of silence that had separated them for so many years, demonstrating complete ignorance of how to properly communicate with a deaf person. Sister Beatrice observed the scene with a heavy heart, immediately recognizing the signs of frustration and isolation etched on Eleanor's face. She had seen that same expression on dozens of people arriving at the center, bearing not only communication difficulties, but also the pain of emotional abandonment from those who should offer love and understanding. The nun felt her hands tingle with the urge to approach and offer help, but her shyness kept her paralyzed by the window, watching the painful situation without the courage to intervene. The group slowly made its way to the center's main entrance, where Sister Margaret awaited them with a warm smile, and the other staff members lined up for formal introductions. Edward walked a few steps ahead, clearly anxious to finish the obligatory visit as quickly as possible, while Eleanor followed him in silence, her curious eyes observing every detail of the environment, as if searching for something she had lost long ago and hoped to rediscover in that special place. Sister Beatrice's journey up to that point had been marked by a shyness that accompanied her since childhood, when she was just a thin, quiet girl who preferred to hide behind books rather than participate in noisy schoolyard games. The daughter of a humble family from a rural area, she grew up observing the world around her with attentive and sensitive eyes, noticing details that went unnoticed by others, especially the difficulties faced by people living on the fringes of society. Her religious calling awakened at 18, when she witnessed a nun lovingly caring for a group of abandoned children, and she understood that her mission on earth was to serve those most in need of love and attention. During her years of formation at the convent, Sister Beatrice discovered that her natural shyness, which she had always considered a weakness, could be transformed into a powerful strength when directed towards serving others. Her ability to observe silently and understand people's unexpressed needs became a valuable tool in pastoral work, allowing her to connect deeply with those who were rejected or misunderstood by society. It was during an internship at a public hospital that she first encountered sign language, when she was assigned to accompany an elderly woman who had lost her hearing and couldn't communicate with the doctors. Fascinated by the beauty and complexity of visual language, Sister Beatrice immersed herself in the study of ASL with a dedication that surprised even her superiors at the convent. She spent hours studying each movement, each facial expression, each subtle variation that could completely alter the meaning of a message. She discovered that her hands, which always trembled with nervousness in the presence of strangers, found extraordinary elegance and fluency when communicating through signs, as if they had finally found their true language. More than simply learning the technique of visual communication, Sister Beatrice developed a unique sensitivity to grasp the emotions and feelings hidden behind each gesture. She perceived when someone signed with suppressed anger, when they expressed deep longing, or when they tried to hide tears through seemingly neutral signs. This special ability transformed her into an exceptional interpreter, capable of conveying not just the words, but the entire emotional weight that accompanied them, building bridges of understanding between worlds seemingly separated by silence. When she was assigned to work at the St. Francis Outreach Center, Sister Beatrice finally found her place in the world. There, she discovered she could use her shyness as a tool for empathy, discreetly approaching the most withdrawn individuals and offering them the comfort of respectful and caring communication. Her special gift with sign language developed even further, becoming almost poetic in how she could express complex concepts and profound feelings through gentle and precise movements. The students at the center used to say that Sister Beatrice's hands were magical, capable of transforming thoughts into movement in such a natural and fluid way that it resembled a delicate dance. She had even created some of her own signs to express spiritual and emotional concepts that didn't exist in the traditional ASL vocabulary. Signs that were adopted and passed on by students as small treasures of communication. Despite all her talent and dedication, Sister Beatrice remained an extremely discreet and humble person, preferring to work behind the scenes and let others receive credit for the successes achieved at the center. Her shyness prevented her from promoting herself or seeking recognition, and often her most brilliant contributions went unnoticed by visitors and authorities who only knew the institution superficially. That morning, as she observed the arrival of Edward Maxwell and his mother, Sister Beatrice felt that her years of preparation and personal development were being tested in a way she had never imagined, as if destiny was about to place in her trembling hands the opportunity to make a difference in the lives of people she didn't even know, yet who already deeply touched her compassionate heart. Edward Maxwell had built his business empire based on three principles he considered unquestionable: maximum efficiency, immediate results, and total control over every aspect of his personal and professional life. At 45, he commanded one of the nation's largest hotel chains, with properties in 15 states and an international reputation that attracted investors from around the world. His routine was meticulously planned, every meeting timed to the minute, every decision made based on cold cost-benefit analyses that left no room for sentimentality or emotional considerations. The only son of a traditional family, Edward grew up in an environment where financial success was measured as the only valid indicator of personal worth, and feelings were seen as inconvenient obstacles that hindered rational decision-making. His father, an equally successful businessman, had taught him early on that demonstrating vulnerability or emotional attachment was a sign of weakness, and that a truly competent businessman should maintain emotional distance from everyone around him, including his own family. Edward's relationship with his mother, Eleanor, had drastically deteriorated since the terrible accident that forever changed their family dynamic. 3 years prior, during a vacation trip to Europe that Edward had gifted his parents for their wedding anniversary, the car they were traveling in was hit by a drunk driver on the winding roads of the Rocky Mountains in Colorado. Edward's father succumbed to his injuries, and his sudden passing left an immense void in the family's life. But it was the total hearing loss suffered by Eleanor in the same accident that created an seemingly insurmountable barrier between mother and son. Edward never knew how to adequately deal with his mother's new condition, as his rigid education, focus solely on practical results had not prepared him to face situations requiring patience, understanding, and emotional adaptation. In the first few months after the accident, he tried to solve the situation the way he always solved problems, by hiring the country's top specialists, purchasing the most modern hearing aids available on the international market, and investing small fortunes in experimental treatments that promised to restore at least some of the lost hearing. When all medical resources proved futile and specialists confirmed that Eleanor's hearing loss was irreversible, Edward reacted in the only way he knew how, by emotionally distancing himself from the situation and treating his mother's needs as yet another business problem to be managed through practical and efficient solutions. He hired a team of professional caregivers, ensured she had access to all possible material comforts, and considered that he had satisfactorily fulfilled his filial obligations. What Edward couldn't comprehend was that his mother didn't just need medical care and material comfort, but emotional connection, understanding, and genuine love. Eleanor had lost not only the ability to hear, but also the ability to effectively communicate with her only son, creating an abyss of silence and loneliness that grew daily. She watched Edward talking quickly on the phone, gesturing impatiently when she didn't understand his instructions, and sighing heavily whenever he had to repeat information, as if her presence were an inconvenience in his packed schedule. For Edward, that visit to the St. Francis Outreach Center was just another social obligation related to his company's corporate social responsibility programs, a necessary activity to maintain his business's good public image and secure certain tax benefits that helped reduce operational costs. He had decided to bring his mother along only because his marketing advisors suggested that her presence would make the visit more humanized for the photographs to be released in the press and on the company's social media. As he walked towards the center's entrance, Edward constantly checked messages on his phone, mentally calculating how many minutes he could dedicate to the activity before heading to his next meeting, completely oblivious to the fact that his mother was observing every detail of the environment with a curiosity and hope he couldn't perceive in his constant rush to turn every moment of life into an efficient business transaction. The mansion where Eleanor lived had become a gilded cage, filled with every luxury money could buy, but empty of the human warmth and understanding her soul so craved. Surrounded by efficient staff and professional caregivers who performed their duties with mechanical precision, she spent her days observing the movement of life through the large glass windows, feeling like a spectator in a world she could no longer truly belong to. Edward had ensured she had access to the best doctors, the most modern equipment, and every imaginable material comfort, but he had utterly failed to offer her what she needed most, his genuine and affectionate presence. Edward's sporadic visits to the mansion were formal and protocol-driven events, during which he checked if all medical care was being properly followed, if bills were being paid on time, and if employees were fulfilling their duties according to the detailed instructions he had left in writing. His conversations with his mother were limited to basic, repetitive gestures, pointing to objects when he wanted to know if she needed anything, or making improvised signs that demonstrated his complete lack of knowledge about proper communication with deaf people. Edward's frustration was evident in each failed communication attempt, his movements becoming increasingly exaggerated and impatient when Eleanor didn't understand what he was trying to convey. He raised his voice uselessly, as if volume could break the physical barrier of deafness, and sighed heavily whenever he had to repeat information, clearly demonstrating that he considered those interactions a waste of time in his always packed schedule of more important commitments. For Eleanor, each visit from her son was a mix of joy and deep pain, as she desperately longed for a few moments of true connection, but received only superficial and impatient interactions that made her feel even more isolated and misunderstood. She watched Edward's lips moving rapidly, trying to decipher words she couldn't hear, and saw irritation growing in his eyes whenever she asked him to repeat something or showed she hadn't understood his hurried instructions. Eleanor's solitude had deepened drastically since the loss of her husband, who had been her emotional anchor for over 40 years of marriage. Before the accident, she was a sociable and communicative woman who loved hosting friends at home, organizing elegant dinners, and participating in high society charity events. Her warm and welcoming personality had been one of the characteristics that most attracted people to her social circle, and her ability to make everyone feel special and welcome was recognized by all who knew her. Now confined to forced silence and the incomprehension of those around her, Eleanor felt as if her true personality were trapped within a body that could no longer express itself adequately. She had so much to say, so many emotions to share, so many memories to preserve and transmit, but she couldn't find a way to break the barrier separating her from the outside world. Her eyes still shone with intelligence and sensitivity, but her voice had become irrelevant in a world that lacked the patience to find alternative forms of communication. During the long, lonely nights in her luxurious bedroom, Eleanor lay awake thinking about the son she had raised with so much love and dedication, wondering where she had lost the emotional connection that united them when Edward was a child. She remembered the times he ran into her arms when he was sad or scared, how he used to tell her all the details of his school days, how they would laugh together watching old movies on Sunday afternoons. The material wealth Edward had accumulated over the years contrasted drastically with the emotional poverty that characterized his relationship with his mother, creating a painful paradox where the one most in need of love and attention received only technical care and practical solutions that failed to touch the true needs of her wounded heart. Edward and Eleanor's entrance into the St. Francis Outreach Center caused a respectful silence among the staff and students gathered in the main lobby. Sister Margaret, the director, advanced with a warm smile and extended her hand to greet the businessman, who responded with a firm, formal handshake, his eyes already scanning the environment to quickly assess the facilities and calculate how much time would be needed to fulfill that social obligation. Edward maintained his characteristic posture of a businessman, always on the move, discreetly checking his watch every few minutes and keeping his phone at hand, ready to answer any urgent call that might arise. Eleanor remained a few steps behind, observing with genuine curiosity the walls decorated with artwork created by students, the informative posters about sign language, and the photographs showing moments of joy and personal achievements of the center's attendees. Her eyes lingered especially on a large image depicting a group of deaf individuals performing in a local theater, their faces radiating a contagious happiness she hadn't experienced in years, not since before the accident that transformed her life into a labyrinth of silence and isolation. Sister Margaret enthusiastically began explaining the work developed at the institution, gesturing animatedly as she described the various programs offered for individuals with hearing impairments, the vocational courses that prepared students for the job market, and the social inclusion projects that had changed the lives of hundreds of families in the local community. Edward listened with apparent politeness, but his attention was clearly divided between the director's explanations and the constant notifications arriving on his phone, each vibration representing a business decision he considered infinitely more important than that protocol visit. When the director suggested they visit the classrooms to personally meet some of the students and teachers, Edward ostentatiously checked his watch and commented that he needed to speed up the schedule because he had an important meeting with foreign investors in less than 2 hours. His impatience became increasingly evident through small gestures, the way he tapped his fingers against his thigh, how he constantly shifted his weight from one leg to the other, and how his eyes frequently darted towards the entrance door, as if he were mentally planning his escape from an environment he considered a valuable waste of time. From one of the classrooms, Sister Beatrice discreetly observed the scene through the half-open door, feeling her heart race with a mixture of compassion and silent indignation. She could clearly perceive Eleanor's body language, which revealed not only genuine curiosity and interest in the center's work, but also a deep yearning for attention and understanding. The way the elderly woman delicately touched the displayed objects, how she timidly smiled at the staff who greeted her, and especially how her eyes filled with cautious hope whenever someone included her in conversations, deeply touched the nun's sensitive heart. The tension in the atmosphere intensified when Edward abruptly interrupted one of Sister Margaret's explanations about the pedagogical methods used at the center, stating that he needed to make an urgent call to resolve an issue related to the acquisition of a new hotel property in London. He moved a few feet away, speaking loudly on the phone about contracts, values, and delivery deadlines, completely oblivious to the embarrassment his attitude was causing those present. Eleanor remained alone in the middle of the lobby, observing her son with an expression of painful resignation that blended unconditional love with a deep sadness seemingly rooted in years of emotional abandonment. Sister Beatrice noticed how the woman's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her handbag strap, a nervous gesture that revealed her anxiety and discomfort with the situation, and how her eyes constantly shifted to the people around, seeking some form of human connection that could fill the void left by her own son's indifference. Sister Beatrice felt an inexplicable force, moving her hesitant feet towards the main lobby, where Eleanor remained alone, melancholically observing her son, who was animatedly speaking on the phone about business that seemed infinitely more important than her presence at that special moment. The nun fought against her natural shyness, feeling her hands sweat inside her habit, and her heart pound with an anxiety that had accompanied her since childhood, whenever she had to approach strangers, especially people of high social standing, who intimidated her with their apparent elegance and sophistication. Each step towards the elderly woman required immense courage, as if Sister Beatrice were climbing an emotional mountain that tested all the limits of her withdrawn personality. She took a deep breath, whispered a silent prayer asking for strength and wisdom, and finally positioned herself discreetly beside Eleanor, waiting for the appropriate moment to introduce herself without causing embarrassment or interrupting any important thought the visitor might be cultivating in that instant of forced solitude. Eleanor noticed the young nun's presence and turned slowly, her eyes meeting a kind and sincere face that radiated a genuine goodness completely different from the formal and self-serving expressions she was accustomed to seeing at high society social events. Sister Beatrice smiled timidly, feeling her cheeks flush slightly, and raised her hands hesitantly, positioning them in front of her chest with delicate and respectful movements. With fingers trembling slightly from emotion and nervousness, Sister Beatrice began to sign a simple greeting in ASL, her movements initially cautious and uncertain, like someone carefully testing the ground before taking a more decisive step. Her hands moved with a natural elegance that contrasted with her timid personality, forming the basic signs for good morning and welcome with a fluidity that revealed years of dedicated study and constant practice. Eleanor's reaction was immediate and electrifying, her eyes widening with genuine surprise that quickly transformed into cautious joy, like someone finding fresh water after walking days through the desert. She raised her own hands with somewhat rusty and uncertain movements, signing back a basic response that demonstrated limited knowledge of sign language, likely acquired through some frustrated attempts to learn on her own during years of forced isolation. Sister Beatrice immediately realized that Eleanor knew only basic rudiments of ASL, and her experience as an educator made her instantly adapt her approach, simplifying the signs and incorporating more expressive facial expressions to facilitate comprehension. She slowly signed that her name was Beatrice, that she had worked at the center for many years, and that she was very happy to meet her, each gesture accompanied by a warm smile that conveyed sincerity and welcome. The silent conversation between the two women created a bubble of intimacy and connection in the middle of the bustling lobby, as if the rest of the world had temporarily disappeared to make way for that extraordinary encounter between two souls who recognized each other. Eleanor began to visibly relax, her shoulders easing from the constant tension she carried, and her eyes shining with a vivacity that had remained dormant through years of solitude and incomprehension. Sister Beatrice delicately asked, through careful signs and interrogative facial expressions, if Eleanor was enjoying her visit to the center and if there was anything specific she would like to see or experience. The woman's answer was touching in its simplicity. She signed with hesitant but emotional movements that she was very happy to finally find someone who could speak to her in her language, even if in a basic way. Edward remained engrossed in his phone call, gesturing animatedly as he discussed technical details about hotel renovations and international marketing strategies, completely oblivious to the magical moment unfolding just a few feet away. Sister Margaret and the other staff members discreetly observed the interaction between the two women, recognizing that something special was unfolding before their eyes, an authentic human connection that transcended all the social and economic barriers that usually separated people from such different worlds. Sister Beatrice's courage in breaking through her own shyness was being rewarded with something far greater than she had imagined. the opportunity to deeply touch the life of someone desperately in need of genuine understanding and acceptance. As the minutes passed and trust between the two women grew, Sister Beatrice realized she could deepen their communication beyond basic courtesy signs. Her movements became more fluid and expressive, incorporating a natural grace that transformed sign language into something akin to dance, each gesture laden with emotional meaning and visual poetry. She began to use more advanced ASL features, such as classifiers and non-manual expressions, that gave life and depth to her silent words. Eleanor was fascinated to realize that communication could go far beyond the elementary signs she had tried to learn on her own through books and internet videos. Sister Beatrice was showing her that ASL was a complete and rich language, capable of expressing not just basic needs, but also complex feelings, detailed memories and abstract thoughts that she had kept in her heart for years without being able to share with anyone. Encouraged by the nun's respectful and warm attention, Eleanor began to open up emotionally, trying to express through improvised gestures and intense facial expressions the profound loneliness that had become her constant companion since the accident. Sister Beatrice intuitively understood what the woman was trying to communicate and responded with signs that expressed deep empathy, validating her feelings and demonstrating that she was not alone in that moment of vulnerability. With infinite delicacy, Sister Beatrice signed questions about Eleanor's previous life, her interests, cherished memories, and unfulfilled dreams. The answer came in an emotional mix of basic signs, improvised gestures, and tears of relief that welled from the woman's eyes, as if an emotional dam had finally broken after years of forced containment. She recounted through this mixed language of communication her passion for classical literature, her longing for the days when she organized literary gatherings at home, and especially the pain of no longer being able to share her profound reflections with the son she loved unconditionally. Sister Beatrice was deeply touched to discover the inner richness hidden behind Eleanor's apparent silence. She realized she was facing a cultured and sensitive woman with decades of life experience and accumulated wisdom, who had been reduced to the role of an incapable person simply because she couldn't communicate in the oral language the world considered normal. The nun felt a loving indignation growing in her chest, a sense of injustice at the waste of so much human potential due to the lack of understanding and patience from those around her. Inspired by the courage Eleanor showed in opening up emotionally, Sister Beatrice decided to share something of her own experience. She signed about her own shyness, how she had found in sign language a way to express herself that transcended her personal limitations, and how each person she met at the center taught her something new about resilience and inner strength. Her signs became increasingly poetic, incorporating visual metaphors that compared communication to a bridge between lonely hearts. Eleanor was fascinated by Sister Beatrice's silent eloquence, realizing she was in the presence of someone who possessed a special gift for transforming simple movements into expressions of profound beauty and meaning. She signed, with tears in her eyes, that she had never imagined communication could be so rich and emotionally satisfying without the use of voice, and that she felt as if she were discovering a new art form that spoke directly to her heart. The silent conversation between the two evolved to even more intimate topics, with Eleanor revealing her frustration at not being able to express to her son how much she loved him and how much she missed the emotional closeness they had shared when he was younger. Sister Beatrice listened with her heart, offering not only understanding but also hope, signing that it was never too late to rebuild emotional bridges and that true love always found ways to manifest when it found appropriate channels of expression. The moment became even more touching when Sister Beatrice created, specifically for Eleanor, a personalized sign that meant renewed hope, a delicate movement combining the signs for light and heart in a unique and beautiful way. Eleanor repeated the sign several times, memorizing every detail, and smiled through her tears as she realized she had gained not only a new word in her limited vocabulary, but also a tangible symbol that her life could still be enriched by authentic and transformative human connections. Edward finished his phone call with a sigh of satisfaction, putting the device back in his suit pocket as he turned to look for his mother in the center's lobby. What his eyes found left him completely paralyzed. Eleanor was engaged in an animated and deeply emotional conversation with a young nun, her hands moving with a vivacity he hadn't seen in years, her face radiating a genuine joy that drastically contrasted with the resigned and melancholic expression that had become her trademark since the accident. For a moment, Edward was confused, trying to comprehend what he was witnessing. His mother, who for years had seemed apathetic and disconnected from the world around her, was clearly engaged in rich and satisfying communication, gesturing with enthusiasm and smiling in a way he had forgotten she was capable of. The contrast with the frustrated and superficial interactions they maintained at home was so stark that it caused him a painful shock of recognition about his own inadequacy as a son and caregiver. He approached slowly, fascinated by the nun's fluid and expressive movements, as she communicated with his mother through a language he had never bothered to learn or even consider as a real possibility for effective communication. Edward realized that Sister Beatrice wasn't just conveying basic information, but was engaged in a complex and emotionally rich conversation, capable of making his mother laugh, cry, reflect, and express herself in ways he had considered lost forever. Guilt began to infiltrate his chest like a physical ache, a growing realization that he had profoundly failed in his responsibility as a son by choosing the easier path of delegating care instead of investing time and energy in learning to communicate properly with his own mother. He remembered all the times he had impatiently interrupted her hesitant attempts at communication, how he had sighed in exasperation when she didn't understand his hurried instructions, how he had gradually reduced his visits to avoid the mutual frustration that characterized their encounters. Edward watched his mother repeat a special sign the nun had taught, her eyes shining with a concentration and joy that revealed an intelligence and vitality that remained completely intact despite the hearing loss. He realized, with painful clarity, that he had completely underestimated his mother's ability to continue learning, growing, and emotionally connecting with other people, mistakenly assuming that deafness had diminished her essence as a person. The most devastating revelation came when Edward understood that his mother hadn't become less intelligent, less interesting, or less affectionate after the accident. He had simply stopped making the necessary effort to access those qualities through alternative communication methods. All the vibrancy, humor, and wisdom he admired in her before the accident were still present, just waiting for someone with the patience and dedication to find the right key to unlock them. Sister Margaret discreetly approached Edward, observing the emotional transformation occurring in his facial expression. She softly commented on Sister Beatrice's special talent for connecting with people in difficult situations, explaining how the young nun had dedicated years of her life to the in-depth study of sign language and the development of innovative techniques to facilitate emotional communication through visual resources. Edward listened to the director's explanations with growing fascination and remorse, realizing that there was a complex science and a refined art behind what he had always considered mere basic gesturing. He discovered that there were courses, methods, technologies, and entire communities dedicated to creating communication bridges for deaf people, resources he could have explored years earlier had he possessed the humility to recognize his own limitations and seek professional help. The successful businessman, who always prided himself on his ability to solve complex problems and find innovative solutions for business challenges, understood that he had miserably failed in the most important problem of his personal life: maintaining a significant emotional connection with the person he loved most in the world, simply because he had been too proud to admit his ignorance and seek the knowledge needed to overcome a barrier that was perfectly surmountable. Edward remained motionless for several minutes, observing the extraordinary interaction between his mother and Sister Beatrice, feeling an emotional storm brewing within his chest with an intensity he hadn't experienced in decades. All the psychological defenses he had built over the years to protect himself from vulnerable feelings began to crumble before the undeniable evidence of his own inadequacy as a son and as a human being. Tears he hadn't shed since childhood began to form in his eyes, blurring his vision and forcing him to confront the painful reality he had avoided for so long. When the conversation between the two women reached a natural pause, Edward approached with hesitant steps, feeling like a lost child needing to ask strangers for help. Sister Beatrice noticed his presence and turned to greet him, immediately noting the emotional transformation that had occurred in his facial expression. The successful businessman's eyes had lost their characteristic, calculating coolness, revealing a raw human vulnerability that contrasted completely with the professional persona he had maintained throughout the visit. With a voice choked with emotion, Edward apologized for the interruption and asked if it would be possible to learn some basic signs to communicate better with his mother. Sister Beatrice was touched by the genuine humility in his request, realizing she was witnessing a moment of profound personal transformation that transcended anything she could have imagined when she woke up that morning. She responded with an encouraging smile that radiated understanding and forgiveness, signing that it would be an honor to teach him the first steps in this new language of connection. Edward awkwardly positioned himself next to his mother, his initial movements clumsy and unsure, like someone learning to walk again. Sister Beatrice began with extremely simple signs. "Thank you. I'm sorry. I love you." Each gesture was repeated several times, with careful explanations about hand position, appropriate facial expression, and the subtle movements that differentiated one sign from another. Edward concentrated with an intensity he usually reserved only for the most crucial business negotiations. Determined to master this new skill with the same dedication he applied to his professional projects. The most emotional moment arrived when Edward managed to sign his first complete sentence to his mother. "I'm sorry for all these years." His hands trembled slightly from emotion and nervousness, but the signs were executed with enough clarity for Eleanor to perfectly understand the message. Her reaction was instantaneous and devastating. Abundant tears began to stream down her face as she signed back that she loved him unconditionally and had never lost hope that one day they could truly communicate. Sister Beatrice served as an emotional interpreter during the following minutes, translating not only the words, but also the profound feelings that mother and son had kept in their hearts during years of separation forced by silence. Edward discovered that his mother had spent nights awake thinking about him, worrying about his health, his happiness, his personal relationships, and feeling powerless to express all the love and care she still felt for him, despite the emotional distance that separated them. Eleanor, in turn, could finally communicate to Edward that she understood the pressures and responsibilities he faced in his professional life, that she didn't blame him for his communication limitations, and that her greatest desire was simply to spend more time in his company, even if it was just sitting beside him in comfortable silence. She also expressed her gratitude for all the material care he had provided, but made it clear that his emotional presence was infinitely more valuable than any financial comfort. Edward completely broke down as he realized he had wasted precious years of his relationship with his mother due to pride, ignorance, and fear of confronting his own emotional limitations. He repeatedly asked for forgiveness, both verbally and through the new signs he was learning, promising that he would dedicate all the necessary time and energy to become fluent in the language that could deeply reconnect them. Sister Beatrice watched that extraordinary reconciliation with tears of joy in her eyes, realizing she had been an instrument of a transformation that would forever change the dynamic of that family. Her natural shyness had been overcome by the love and compassion she felt for both of them, allowing her to facilitate one of the most important and significant moments of their lives. In the months that followed that transformative encounter, the Maxwell family's life changed radically and permanently. Edward immediately hired the city's best ASL teachers and dedicated 2 hours every evening to intensive study of sign language. Approaching this new learning with the same meticulous determination he applied to his most ambitious business projects. He discovered that ASL was infinitely richer and more complex than he had imagined. A complete and sophisticated language that allowed him to express not only basic needs, but also abstract concepts, subtle humor, and deeply nuanced emotions. Sister Beatrice became a constant presence in the family mansion, visiting them twice a week to give private lessons and facilitating the first truly deep family conversations Edward and Eleanor had had in years. During these sessions, the nun witnessed extraordinary moments of mutual rediscovery, as mother and son shared memories, dreams, fears, and hopes that had remained guarded in their hearts during the long period of emotional separation forced by silence. Edward was fascinated to discover aspects of his mother's personality he had forgotten or never fully known. Eleanor revealed herself to be an extraordinary storyteller, capable of narrating hilarious episodes from his childhood with vivid details and expressive gestures that made him laugh to tears. She also shared profound reflections on literature, philosophy, and art that demonstrated a keen intelligence and cultural sensitivity that remained completely intact despite years of forced isolation. Inspired by the personal transformation he was experiencing, Edward decided to use his influence and business resources to create something that could benefit other families facing similar challenges. He established a formal partnership with the St. Francis Outreach Center, funding the construction of new facilities and the creation of innovative programs that combined advanced technology with humanized pedagogical methods for teaching sign language. The most ambitious project was born from a joint idea by Edward and Sister Beatrice to create a center of excellence in inclusive communication that would offer not only ASL courses for families of deaf individuals, but also corporate awareness programs to make the business environment more accessible and welcoming. Edward discovered that thousands of talented professionals with hearing impairments were systematically excluded from the job market simply due to a lack of understanding and adaptation from employers. Sister Beatrice was invited to direct the new center, a responsibility that initially terrified her due to her natural shyness, but which she accepted after understanding that she could positively impact the lives of hundreds of people facing situations similar to Eleanor's. With Edward's support and a multidisciplinary team of educators, psychologists, and technologists, she developed revolutionary teaching methods that transformed ASL learning into an emotionally enriching and culturally transformative experience. The center quickly became a national benchmark, attracting visitors from other states and even from neighboring countries like Canada or Mexico, interested in replicating the innovative programs developed by the team. Sister Beatrice discovered that her shyness, far from being a limitation, had transformed into a powerful tool for empathy that allowed her to connect deeply with people in vulnerable situations and create safe and welcoming learning environments. Edward, in turn, experienced a personal transformation that reflected in all areas of his life. His newfound sensitivity to issues of inclusion and accessibility influenced his company's human resources policies, making it a pioneer in hiring and promoting employees with various types of disabilities. He discovered that diversity not only enriched the work environment, but also generated innovations and perspectives that significantly improved the quality of services offered to clients. The relationship between Edward and Eleanor blossomed in a way that surprised them both. They established daily communication rituals that included shared breakfast every morning, joint reading sessions on Sundays, and long evening conversations where they explored topics ranging from family matters to philosophical reflections on the meaning of life and the importance of authentic human connections. Eleanor became an active collaborator at the center, offering inspiring testimonials to other families and participating in awareness campaigns about the challenges faced by people with hearing impairments. Her eloquence in ASL, combined with her personal experience of overcoming adversity, transformed her into one of the most respected voices in the local deaf community, proving that it's never too late to discover new talents and life purposes. 3 years later, in the crowded auditorium of the Center of Excellence in Inclusive Communication, Sister Beatrice emotionally watched the graduation ceremony for the 100th class of family members who had learned ASL. Edward stood on stage beside his mother, simultaneously translating her inspiring speech about overcoming adversity and unconditional love. Eleanor gestured with the elegance of a poet, her hands telling the story of how a timid nun had transformed not only their lives, but an entire community. In the front row, dozens of reunited families celebrated their own journeys of rediscovery, each carrying unique stories of reconciliation and growth. Sister Beatrice smiled through tears of gratitude, remembering the day she almost didn't have the courage to approach a lonely woman in the center's lobby. Sometimes the greatest miracles begin with the smallest of gestures. Trembling hands, reaching out to a heart waiting to be understood. That simple greeting had transformed into the bridge that reconnected a family and inspired an entire silent revolution of love and inclusion.